murder, prostitution.
Sammie Dean was an absolutely beautiful woman.
The mayor's son, and regular clients.
She was found brutally strangled to death.
The apartment where Sammie Dean was murdered, there was a lot of activity. All of a sudden, it got icy cold.
The windows would fog up for no apparent reason. My daughter says, "It's Sammie. She's crying."
The desert Southwest. Perhaps there is no area more awe-inspiring, more beautiful, yet more mysterious. Follow me now into the northern Arizona mountains to a town called Jerome. Population 343. Of course, this number only takes into account those who are still breathing. You see, my friends, Jerome, Arizona is a town with a past. And unlike most places where the past is relegated to history books, in Jerome, the past can be seen walking everywhere.
The town abounds in legends and stories of the spirits and the paranormal activities.
You live in Jerome, you sort of get used to odd things happening. Shadows, or you hear things, or you sense something.
You know, it's a town where people live fast and they live hard lives, and a lot of psychic fingerprints are still left behind in a lot of buildings.
That's an interesting way to describe a cold chill knifing through you, or an apparition appearing at the foot of your bed. Nonetheless, to really understand the ghosts of Jerome, you need to go back to a time when these bloodless beings were among the living.
Jerome was a mining community in Prescott's early territorial history.
In 1899, the word was out, kind of like the California gold rush, that we might have a similar bonanza up here with copper. By 1923-24, we had 15,000 people living here.
Oh yeah, this little boomtown pulled in $1 billion a year for the mining companies. And men with picks and shovels came from everywhere to get their cut. And guess what? You put a lot of hard-working men in one place, mix in some money, and well, there's gonna be a lot of colorful side effects.
We were called the Sin City of the West. This was the baddest place anywhere.
Gambling, murder, theft. It didn't get any more wicked.
It was just the roaring 1900s. They had a great time. They made their money and they went to the bars and spent it.
Let's be honest, it wasn't just beer and whiskey that these guys spent all their hard-earned money on.
A few of the more famous women of the town made a really good living operating brothels.
The brothel industry was very significant to Jerome because without the brothels, you would have had a lot more crime going on. This was an outlet.
It seems that our little town of Jerome was way ahead of its time at the turn of the century. More than 100 prostitutes walked the streets in less than 1 square mile. Seems to me, in Jerome, Arizona, the oldest profession was an obsession.
Business was booming. The miners worked so hard that they needed diversions. And the diversions, of course, were going to be sex, drinking, gambling, all the bad stuff.
Now, before you start scouring the internet for a one-way ticket to Jerome, remember, this was a long time ago. And like my uncle used to say, good times are like bloodlettings. Unfortunately, they don't last forever.
1953, the mining companies shut down. People literally packed up the next day and moved out of town.
Jerome became a ghost town as fast as it became a thriving mining community.
People just left their buildings and their homes, just walked out.
But these buildings that were abandoned long ago, trust me, they remain occupied to this day.
So many things took place here as such a wicked city. People that have moved into these historic buildings, there are so many of them that have their own stories of the paranormal activities, and we have them still today.
The shadows, the voices, the specters that stampede through this town. They are the remnants of its decadent past. Oh, but one spirit in particular is not searching for thrills. She is searching for justice.
We were at her home where Sammie was killed, and it just got icy cold.
Jerome, a mining town carved into the high desert of northern Arizona, has a colorful past.
We were called the Sin City of the West. There were fights, there were brawls, there were lots of bars. There was prostitution.
There were thousands of people that lived here, and now they're all gone. They didn't all leave happily.
Poor Sammie Dean did not leave here happily. It was the Great Depression. She and her husband came to Jerome in search of a better life. And then she was alone and penniless, trapped in a town with no opportunities for women. She was forced to walk these streets to support herself. And her ghost is still trapped here. Today you can take a stroll down Main Street. You know, it's quite lovely here in Jerome, but if you do, watch out. Because Sammie is hardly the only spirit who wanders these streets.
Jerome is definitely haunted. There are 450 of us, give or take, that live here, and probably a lot more that you just can't see.
The Connor Hotel is very, very haunted. Workers have seen a man, and he's usually in a suit, and he usually has a bowler hat on his head. Whether it's a ghost of David Connor, we don't know, but people see the ghost.
I know for a fact that houses that used to be boarding houses have unexplained phenomena.
There's a cemetery right outside of Jerome. It's very old and it's very haunted.
You may wonder why this former mining mecca is such a magnet for wandering demons. Well, let me see. Partying, carousing, money, women, and booze. I might want to stay here forever myself.
To this day, it's still a fun town. I think it was fun back then, and I think they really missed the whole action of it. I really do.
But you should know, there are other undead spirits in Jerome. And to them, the memories are anything but happy.
Prostitutes were women forced into extreme circumstances because of the conditions of their lives.
Many of them came with their fiance or their boyfriend. Once they got here, they would often abandon the woman. There were some pretty wicked and awful things that happened to some of these prostitutes as a part of their trade.
Juanita Marie Dean was affectionately known to her friends and neighbors as Sammie. Of all the stories that haunt this town, it is hers that screams the loudest.
Sammie Dean was a young woman that was very beautiful. She was married to a man named George.
For whatever reason we don't know, he just up and left.
She made friends with another woman. The other woman said there are things to be done in Jerome, and very sadly found out what those things were.
But what makes Sammie so special is that unlike most of the women who shared her profession at the time, Sammie had her eye on a better life.
She was one of the few ladies in town that actually had a car, and she had a lot of friends and always was out, went to the movies and shopping.
She was saving money. She wanted to get out. And something in the universe just wasn't going to let that happen.
Fate, my friends, is a funny thing. You see, when the scorching desert sun came up on July 7th, 1931, Sammie had every reason to believe that this was going to be just another beautiful summer's day. But on that day, a crime of passion would begin Sammie's ghost story.
She was found brutally strangled to death.
It was tremendously violent.
Jerome, Arizona, a town where the road to a better life began for many miners. But for Sammie Dean, her road came to a dead end. The life was strangled from her in this house in July of 1931. Was she killed to hide a scandalous love affair? Well, my friends, you may get that answer very soon. For you see, Sammie's ghost still wanders this town, and many will tell you that she is being followed in death by her murderer. Innocent Sammie Dean, abandoned by her husband, forced into prostitution. She did what she had to do to survive, but yet she dreamed of a better life. But fate reached out with darker plans.
Sammie was working for a local house. She was making regular clients. And out of those regular clients, we have the mayor's son, several councilmen. So she was traveling in a very dangerous circle. It's July the 7th. It's unusually hot. Later in the day, Sammie lets a gentleman in.
When Sammie's friends and neighbors didn't see her the rest of the day, they got suspicious and called the cops.
That afternoon, about 5 o'clock, the police find Sammie. She'd been strangled. The whole case never was thoroughly investigated. It was a prostitute. Nobody cared.
It was a quick inquest. They, determined that she was murdered by someone unseen, and that was it.
Officially, the murder does remain unsolved. It's a tragic, tragic case.
Sammie Dean has never been avenged, so to speak. So therefore, she comes back to visit to try to get us to keep that story going.
A case gone cold in the blistering hot town of Jerome, Arizona? That doesn't sound right to me. And trust me, my friends, it never sat well with Sammie Dean either. Because until someone tries to solve her murder, she is going to walk these streets forever.
I believe Sammie is still here. I was performing in the play about Sammie Dean. It was the final performance. We were finished for the night. All of a sudden, the temperature felt like it dropped 20 degrees. I just suddenly felt extremely unwelcome, and I just felt very, 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 very uncomfortable, like it was time to go. When I talk about it, I still get the eerie feeling on the back of my neck and the hairs want to stand up.
I was assisting the Chamber of Commerce with their home tour, and the building that Sammie Dean was murdered in was on the tour. There were a number of people who just got chills and literally felt a presence. One woman jumped around and grabbed my arm, and she said, "I can't go in there. There's a woman telling me I can't go in there." It's Sammie Dean reminding me of the story.
The victim of an unsolved murder desperately trying to tell her side of the story. Well, my story is just getting started. You see, there is another ghost who follows Sammie back to the scene of her murder. And this ghost may have a guilty conscience.
When you go into that room and you're the only soul in that room, you're not the only soul in that room.
During its heyday, the mining town of Jerome, Arizona was famous for both the copper in its hills and the prostitution in its streets. On a hot July afternoon in 1931, Sammie Dean, a reluctant streetwalker, was brutally murdered. Who killed Sammie? A client? A jealous lover? A town official? Her unsolved murder still haunts this town. And so does her ghost.
She's here because she had a brutal death and it wasn't her time to go.
I believe she's unhappy that no one has ever pointed a finger at whoever did murder her. I think that's very probable that she could still be here.
Why does the spirit of a murdered prostitute still wander Jerome? Maybe she's trying to tell us who killed her.
I had the opportunity for several years to live where Sammie Dean was killed. The bedroom that my son was sleeping in was the room that they actually found Sammie Dean in.
None of our children nor our parents would even stay in that room.
You can tell the presence. When you go into that room and you're the only soul in that room, you're not the only soul in that room. In July, around the anniversary of her death, things would get a little bit more active in that room. The windows would fog up for no apparent reason. They'd fog up in the summertime when it was 90 degrees. My daughter, in her very innocence, says, "It's Sammie. She's crying."
Tears of a long-dead woman, crying out for justice from beyond death. Oh, but sit tight, because I haven't gotten to the really good stuff yet. You see, Sammie isn't the only spirit wandering this murder scene.
About a year and a half into living there, my son, he told me that he saw a gentleman walk right through the closed wood door. We made different sleeping arrangements, and I was up one night, and I ran into the same gentleman. The best way to describe him was a silhouette of a very distinguished gentleman. This gentleman had a derby on, very nice long tail type coat.
So, who is this mysterious man haunting the room where Sammie took her last gasping breath? Well, for that, we need to go back to the original scene of the crime.
Sammie and the mayor's son were deeply in love.
He was a client of hers and proposed to her. For whatever reason, she turned him down.
After Sammie's death, the mayor's son disappears. We never see any history record of him again.
So, it was a scorned lover who personally introduced poor Sammie to the Grim Reaper. Case closed. Or was it someone else?
She fell in love with the mayor's son and she was a prostitute. As far as we know, the mayor murdered her.
The mayor was not going to see his son sacrifice his life to a prostitute. And after Sammie's death, the mayor doesn't run for re-election. We don't know why.
Now we have a juicy political thriller, don't we? Did the overprotective father turn murderer to protect his son? Or did he kill to save his own career? Remember that mysterious man in the coat and hat? Maybe he can shed some light on this sordid tale.
Sammie Dean lost her life way before she should have. It's possibly that the gentleman who actually committed the murder is trying to make some type of contact with Sammie to do some type of apology.
The tragedy of prostitution in the West was a life with no meaning, and that's why stories like Sammie, they are important, because they make us realize these are human beings.
Even in its glory days, Jerome was a small town with very few secrets. But someone had to know who took the life of beautiful Sammie Dean. Was her death a crime of passion? Perhaps Sammie knew too many secrets. Whatever the case, you can bet Sammie knows who did her in, and she will not stop wandering Jerome, Arizona, until you know too. Nighty-night.